Welcome, folks. Welcome to like a slightly odd scheduled Garblag. We don't stream at the weekends. My name's Millie. Welcome to Garblag Games. So if you joined us on Tuesday for Coriolis when we were playing Shenanigans in Space, I mentioned that we would be here live and we would be talking to some cool people about Coriolis. And I've brought some cool people here. So what we're going to do tonight is a lot of spoilers for all of Coriolis, like everything, not just like the big campaigns, but all the individual weird bits as well, probably. And there are many individual weird bits in Coriolis. It's wonderful. So we will cover all of that. If you don't want any of that spoiling, go away.
Just stop watching.
Go away. Come back in 6, 12, 18 months when you have experienced all the weird and wonderful bits of Coriolis. And then you can watch it, listen to it, whatever you fancy. This show as well tonight is going to be podcasted for the Effekt podcast. If you've never listened to the Effekt podcast before, go and do it. There's a wealth of Coriolis in there. A wealth. And aliens and... Forbidden, I always call it Forbidden Realms.
Forbidden Lands.
Yeah, Forbidden Realms I want to call it, but it's not. It's Forbidden
Lands. No, not Realms. That's an entirely different IP.
Lost Realms is different to Forbidden Lands.
Yeah, I get it all wrong. But there's a wealth of stuff over there. So go and check it out. Also, you can see me in some of them pretending to be a lost little space girl, a dirty little space Sugoi. In this
very campaign.
In this very campaign.
Talking about.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop rambling and let the podcast host take over. That's you, Matthew.
All right.
Yeah, that's it.
Hi, I'm Matthew. I'm host of the Effekt podcast, which used to be called the Coriolis Effekt and used to be all about Coriolis. And then Bloomin' Free League went and made a bunch more games that we quite enjoy as well. So we had to change the name, and now we talk about a lot of them. I also run a stream on our little used YouTube channel. It also appears on Twitch, but seriously, who watches Twitch nowadays? So you can find a good chunk of our campaign on the stream, and also in the Effekt AP, which is the actual play feed of the Effekt podcast. Now, I kind of feel I ought to introduce the next person who, given that we're talking about a campaign that's written by, well, in great part by Richard, I think Richard should be the next to speak.
Yeah, sure. I've written a campaign for Coriolis specifically. I've been working with Free League for quite some time, doing some fixes and whatnots on other titles as well, Tales from the Loop, etc. But Coriolis has been the bulk, I would say. And as we're closing in on the release of the third book and the campaign end, I thought it was nice that we would just sit here together by the fire of the burning bridge and talk about all the spoilers, all the thoughts. Now you can't affect it anymore, so now just let go of, like, just pour in all the suggestions, ideas, and comments on the campaign and the Coriolis at large. I think I'd love to talk about Coriolis. I've been living with Coriolis for quite a few years now, so it would be nice to just have this chat together. And I'll pass the torch to James, I think, who has been messaging me during his campaign avidly.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So yeah, obviously a huge fan of it. I have done some work in role-playing games. I've written for a couple of games, The One Ring, Expanse. I've also done a lot of music for a lot of games that people might know me for. So things like 13th Age and Exalted. But yeah, really tonight here, I'm just here as a games master, and the fact that I'm a huge fan of Coriolis, and as Richard said, had a long chance to chat with him about my experiences through the campaign. So yeah, looking forward to talking about it, and I'll hand over to Jonathan.
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I do not have anywhere near the caliber of experience of anyone else here. I don't stream, I don't podcast, I don't write campaigns, I don't write music for role-playing games. I am but a humble game master who has lofty ideas about this particular game and the setting-defining campaign that we've come to discuss. So hopefully I'll be able to share some of that. This is stuff I've been planning since I found Coriolis, and I just haven't quite been able to get into the actual playing of it. I had a daughter about 1.5 years ago, which kind of, really limited my ability to play, but I've still been able to find time to plan stuff. So that's where I'm coming from.
Cool. And I should also say that you are an occasional player in my campaign.
Yes, that's true.
Quite what you're doing here, where you're going to have the whole thing spoiled for you before the end.
We can talk about that, actually. I think that's one of the things that we can talk about, being a game master but also a player, and finding that balance. So we can talk about that. But yes, you can find me playing a character on the Effekt podcast's Mercy of the Icons actual play.
Cool. And I feel I need to invite you back for the first adventure in Ricard's latest book, Wake of the Icons. But
I'm looking forward to
that anon. Ricard, you've got a bit of an agenda for us, haven't you?
Yes, it's thrown together very quickly. We hope that we can take our listeners and viewers through maybe 4 subjects, 4 topics. We'll see if we'll stick to the topic. I'm not sure, but we'll see. One of them is we wanted to talk a little bit about player's journey through the campaign, but also in general. And like how does the game scale, and how does it scale? Like what happens throughout the campaign for the players specifically? I know James have some points that he's gonna start out with on that as well. Then we want to talk a little bit about culture and society, the world kind of before, during, and after the campaign. I think it is a rich, like Coriolis has a very rich society. It has a lot of different conflicts going on. It's not black and white, I would say. It's a very grayscale society that shifts back and forth a lot, and we're gonna dive into that a bit, I think. And then I know Matthew is dying for the chance to talk mechanics on the play. We want to talk darkness points, and I want to talk experience points and some of those things. I also want to talk a little bit more about how I snuck rules that I wanted to change into the campaign books as extended rules or new rules. So we'll see, and maybe talk a little bit about the year 0 system in general in regards to this. And then the last one, if you don't change order, is scope and scale. A little bit on play styles, I think, and the kind of transporting goats on one end, or sitting in a ship sweating about for weeks trying to get to a portal jump, or going like full heroic grandeur at the other end of it in the end. So those are our 4 subjects or topics. Let's see how it goes, I think.
Well, as you said, James has got something to say about
let's start
the
with James.
campaign and the setting. So why don't you start us off, James?
Yeah, that's usually the case about pretty much any subject. So happy to do it. And I guess I'm going to assume some level of foreknowledge from the audience here, so I'm not going to have to describe the entire Coriolis setting from scratch. But I guess one thing I will start off with, though, is because I know you're going to touch it on the 4th agenda point here, but I think one thing I have to start off with is the reason I bought Coriolis in the first place was largely I was looking for a really, really good campaign. I'm typically, as many of my generation are, the kind of fairly time poor these days, because you've got a lot of stuff going on, so you're looking around for pre-written stuff of high quality. This was recommended to me, and so I started the game looking from that point of view. So I guess we would probably say we were in the swept along with an epic saga kind of impression, less of the Firefly kind of just going from week to week and sort of scrabbling by. One of the things that we set out with was I have 3 players that we meet every Friday night. Actually, I lie, we started this in COVID, sorry. So we ran this through Roll20, which is kind of an interesting aspect to it. So there's a lot of copy and pasting pictures from the PDFs and like dragging them onto Roll20, so we had stuff to work with. I just read through. I realized that I finished part 2 I think like March 2021. So I went and read through my players' logs over the weekend just to make sure that I had everything up to date again. And so looking through it, I realized that they copied and pasted a lot of these images into the text of their logs as well, which is kind of great looking back over it. So I think just to start off, I have 3 players. We meet weekly, and they basically played. One character was a singer raised in Coriolis, and kind of like a Mozart of his generation idea. So it was like a real genius, very, very popular, really, really well known. And the idea was kind of moving them from this kind of, and this is probably the most one like tied up in your story in the sense of this is the character who had the big epic arc, which was they're the character where they were like the kind of the pride of the Zenithians, the very much that all of the kind of conservative elite loved this person who's like this kind of wunderkind who suddenly turns into a rebel and then becomes like the absolute sort of face of the resistance because suddenly, the way he changes. And then the other 2 characters, both first come. And I did have a slight plot with the idea of one of them assassinating this singer. So, I had this kind of agenda at the start of that, and that was part of the thing, which never really ended up materializing. So I actually played just about every pre-written adventure before running into Mercy of the Icons on purpose to give them that sense of, well, firstly, I felt we were at least kind of 1 player short, so I wanted to make sure they were a little bit beefed up. And this kind of comes to the question you mentioned earlier, Ricard, about like the players or the player character journey through this. One of the things that this guy deliberately created, this singer, Sani, was to make him a non-combatant, to make him somebody who in combat would be maybe helping other people or stuff like that. And it is difficult to keep that going through the game. Eventually you just end up with so many experience points that it just feels like you're deliberately crippling your character to not give them, some level of weapon skills. And then before you know it, that escalates. And, by the end of it, he's kind of really, really just blasting away through it with the same as everyone else. The kind of curious thing is towards the end of Emissary Lost, in a random encounter with Nestora troops, he just got shot. That was it. 666 critical, boom, dead. The one pivotal character of the team who I was really trying to tie in with the campaign was just like, oh, that's a shame. So that was just, the brutal kind of combat systems that really sort of kicked off in that one. So what I did was we started taking the picture that he'd used, which is one of the shots from the book, and turning it into posters. I was saying like Sani lives and kind of tying in the same idea with the whole idea of the song of the machine and stuff like that, that he became a martyr now rather than, so this was actually quite a powerful one. He was the mystic inclined one in the team as well. So what I did was to replace that. It was down in, it was on Kua at the point where you're chasing, they're already actually at the sprawl, basically, next to the monolith. And so he became one of the other mystics that had been kidnapped. And we kind of just woke him up and he wakes up and there's a woman with a cybernetic eye and he sort of escapes and runs away and he becomes the next one. And you can kind of explain him meeting up with the group because of mystic visions and stuff like that. So it was kind of a quick patch up, but definitely less of a character than Sani had been in that sense. And that was kind of difficult to sort of recover from that. And in a way, Sani, even though he's not in the group anymore, kind of still overshadows everything that they do. But
they're almost like there's 2 things here, right? The one was, as you said, like how do you introduce your characters to Coriolis? That's a big thing, right? Like how do you do you start with a campaign, or do you run other missions, or like do you start? What's the first thing they get to do, really, right? And the other one.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, and the other one is like when people die, what do you do? Like, could we spoke about it right before we went live here, where it's like, can you die like with everyone, literally, and then just carry on the legacy of the ship in the end? Like, is that that is a possible journey, I guess, right?
It's well, they're not dead, the characters. So the people who played Mercy, the characters who played Mercy were Zelian Carvus and Kashar. Found Nur, and now they live on Coriolis with her now. They rent the ship that they did the first mission on to the folks who are now experiencing Mercy too. So the ship is a constant, but the people aren't. So that is literally our game.
Sucks that I'm trying to blow up the ship then in the second book.
I know, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, let's talk about that blowing up the ship.
So my group, Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say really quickly on that one. So during the lockdown, we got guinea pigs, and for some reason the group decided to buy guinea pigs at some point. And so right in that adventure, they come running into the hangar with the ship there, and it's like, why is there a guinea pig walking around outside of the ship? And that literally the guinea pig escaping give them the clue that their engine had been tampered with, and so it was kind of a cute point. But yeah, to your point there, you can't have. I think you have to introduce a campaign the size of most of the icons quite slowly, because it's obviously such a set, Jonathan, I'm going to steal Jonathan's great phrase here, setting defining campaign. You can't change a campaign right from day one. You can't start off with everything changed. It's a very difficult way to, you take away, you undermine the impact of it. So you do have to kind of get that setting feeling like it's really, really solid. And, it takes a lot to change it before you start like really shaking it up like that. So that's why I played as much as I could beforehand to make everyone feel that this was almost an immutable setting that was going to stay like that, because Mercy really does shake it up. And the reactions from my players were phenomenal. I mean, like I said, the quote I always give is that one of my players said that this just basically set the bar for all future campaigns. It was just so detailed and nuanced and just such a complex thing to play through. So, yeah. But I'll let somebody else speak here.
James, can I just jump in and say that what you just described in your campaign, how that non-player character, the non-combat character, just ended up dying, but then becoming a martyr, becoming a symbol for the resistance, as it were, and having the player pick up another mystic, along the journey and making up those kind of. That's so cinematic, like it's just perfect in my eyes, and that kind of leads into what I'm effectively and ultimately, like, I have to preface everything here with, this is stuff for me that I'm in planning with. It's not something I'm necessarily running yet, but that is just straight up down the line, and the whole like building up the setting, making things that. So, like, I've been looking at the timeline. When the Zenithians arrive 60 years later, the emissaries arrive on. Are we saying Zine or Zini? I can't remember.
I'm saying Zine.
Zine.
Say what you want.
The emissaries arrive through on Zine. And then, they one of them comes to Coriolis, and there's a good few segments there in between those two events where the other emissaries can have dispersed, disappeared, gone across the horizon to do stuff, and then you've got like the Ghazali incident, and then you've got the intro to Mercy of the Archons. There is all this time where you absolutely can put in your own homebrew stuff or throw in the other published things. Like, I have an idea of putting in Aram's Secret between Emissary Lost and The Last Cyclade. However, what you were saying before earlier about how actually you did Aram's Secret significantly earlier, because you ran through all the scenarios before you went into the campaign, and how, I mean, I should probably let you say this. Your player just kind of jumped in with it, so I'll let you say it.
No, look, okay, so that's a great point. So, Jonathan, I did run Aram's Secret earlier on, and I had kind of a vague. I mean, one of the things about this again is everyone's campaign is going to run slightly differently, and with mine. We basically had an adjudicator who was kind of taking Sani under his wing. His family had been assassinated, and he's kind of pulling him out. And this is where it kind of goes on this guy's journey. And so part of it was kind of getting the heat off him after some of the earlier missions. Because, I mean, the first mission I ran was the one at the back of the book, like pretty much, I'm sure everyone will. So then we kind of run them down to the kind of Mercury-Venus equivalents in the Kua system and run all those campaigns. And yeah, to your point, one of the things that the players absolutely loved, this kind of is two or three things here. So to Rickard's point, the first thing I'm trying to do from the universe is just give them the whole thing of like, there is this place, there's the third horizon, blah, 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 and then there's Coriolis, and let's do this. And then bit by bit, as you go along, you try and drip feed as much information as you can. You try and never get the players in a situation where they're like, they can't save themselves or they make bad choices because they're not aware of something about the setting. So you're trying very, very hard to preempt anything like that. But yeah, to your point on that one, Jonathan, one of the things my players loved was the fact that on Gina, there's an adventure there that covers Nazarim's sacrifice. And it's kind of, my players' point of view, was the first introduction of Nazarim's sacrifice, which they really thought was a great adventure. But to then get to the mercy of the Icons campaign and Emissary Lost and then see that these guys had come back, my players were really impressed with that, because there's always the artifact of a role-playing game, and they assume that one adventure has been, written here, one adventure has been written there. And the fact that they all tied together in that sense made it a very living, breathing setting. And so from my players' point of view, what they liked about it was just sitting and exploring the setting and making it feel incredibly realistic around them. But that's my group. That's what they really responded well to. So yeah, thanks, Jonathan. That was a good point.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth talking about the different volumes of the campaign here, because I do think Volume 1, Wake of the Martyr. Is that right? No, that's not right. What's Volume 1 called?
Emissary Lost.
Emissary Lost.
Emissary Lost.
Last Side Trade, and then Wake of the Icons.
So you've got scenarios within the books.
Yeah.
Well.
So Emissary Lost, I think, is a great introduction to the world. I mean, by all means, obviously, James, you took people through all the other things as well, but actually you start on Coriolis in Emissary Lost and you learn about the workings of the horizon, the third horizon, and then you start stretching your wings, just going to the planet below Coriolis. So it gives you a real, start small, focus on the world, get to know how people behave within that microcosm of Coriolis, and then here's your first trip to the to another planet.
I think, sorry.
I think that would work really well for groups that hadn't played before. Obviously, generally my players had. I did have a false. So, like you, James, actually, this started for us with lockdown. We were having another campaign that I was going to, at some point, start working Mercy of the Icons into that. But lockdown happened. We used to meet face to face. I said, shall we just carry on the campaign online? One of the players seriously doesn't want to do online. So we were one down. And then I said to the other two players, partly because I'd read this first beginning bit, and it feels quite noirish, I said, well, what about the two of you, my co-host David and his brother Tony, being down at heel detectives, and we'll just kick it off there, see how long it lasts while this lockdown's going on. And the last, we played The Return, which is the end of book 2, on January. We played that, pretty much once a week for about an hour and a half to 2 hours a week online. And we didn't, until around that time in the early part of this year, we didn't really miss out many weeks. So that's pretty solid playing all the way through. The second volume, however, that immediately expands your horizon. Sorry.
It's a good pun.
It immediately expands the whole of the horizon. So your viewpoint is suddenly stretched. And I think even my experienced players were a bit challenged getting their head around all the different factions suddenly coming to see them and offering them work, and all the many feeds into different parts of the adventure, which you can kind of run in a different order depending on what your people want. I think in a way they were overwhelmed. They joined with the Space Nazis, which so at least they had a mission. They were generally doing bad things around the third horizon, but they, so I'd fed them little teasers from the Children of the Song and from other ones as well, and they kind of totally ignored that, which is one of the reasons Dave feels a little bit cheated out of knowing what was going on Coriolis, and what happens at the end of that volume, which I won't spoil straight away, but maybe we will before the end of this is out.
This is a GM only.
I'm gonna spoil it.
Discussion. A reminder.
Yeah.
Just a reminder, spoilers.
Yeah, but you know, we can build the tension for what happens at the end of Volume 2 within the space of this hour and a half as well, can't we?
Something blows up.
Anyway, so they weren't on Coriolis. They didn't touch upon, they didn't do much with the Children of the Song, so they kind of missed out on that whole storyline, and they came back to Coriolis to find the thing that happens, and somebody else can say about what happens. So that difference between those first 2 volumes, I think, is quite marked in that you can really go into that first volume knowing nothing about the Third Horizon, but then the benefit of what you've done, where you've given them a bit of a tour beforehand, I think really pays dividends, not just to player characters, but to players as well, so that they then have a better sense of who they end up working for, or whether they play people off one against each other in the second volume.
Yeah, I think it's a bit. So no, look. I mean, firstly, great points raised there. I think it's a bit like, say, Superman 2. That moment there, like if you were a fan of Superman at the time, and you mentioned Zod, and you just have like that kind of huge moment of like, oh my goodness, it's like one of the biggest enemies. But if you just like watch the first movie, like, and it's a bit like that. So like when things like Nazarene Sacrifice are mentioned and stuff like this are coming back, and they're like, they know what these things are. I think it also you kind of set them up for these big punchlines, these big payoff moments like that. But I still don't disagree with your point that I love the fact that it's a really, really focused start. And like you say, it really is like a little investigation start, fantastic mystery. In fact, one of the things I think I've always thought is the big currency in role-playing games is that payoff from a mystery. And I think, Coriolis has that just forever. There's so many great mysteries there that it's a fun place to explore and go and look at what all these things mean. And finally, with the Wake of the Icons, even the GMs know some of it now, finally.
But I think that's
like, look at this thing over here. What is it?
I think it's a good point on the exploration stuff, because like if we just look at how I'll talk about 2 things mainly: the way I started the campaign for my players, and then also maybe a little bit what the thoughts are on taking the players through this. So because Coriolis, the complex beast of being in Coriolis is that as the rulebook mentions, you can be any constellation of, you can be a traveling circus, literally. And like, how does a traveling circus kind of, get into the full-blown arc of Mercy, the Mercy campaign? But what I did, I think I can relate to what you did, James, is that I kind of course, then knew some of the subjects I wanted to plant for the players. But I also wanted the players to spend a lot of time just with the ship, making sure that they understand that if this thing breaks when they're out in the vacuum of space, they're toast. So like, care about the ship, care about each other, and make money. There's like one of the basic things in the rule book is essentially like, you owe a lot to someone, so get busy living, essentially, right? Get busy getting money in. And I think for me that was like just all I needed. Like, once we had created the characters and we started like seeing how the characters intertwine with each other, and what backgrounds they had, and what other kind of NPCs they had lingering in their kind of peripherals, I think we started just moving goats. I made a point of actually trying to stay a lot in the Kua system at first. I didn't want it to be Star Wars. I didn't want them to like just jump all over the place immediately. I wanted them to have like, you've just gotten this ship, you are like, it's for regular people, it's really expensive or really, really cumbersome to travel. So like, this is what you're like, one of them came from Algol, so they'd earned the right to come to Kua, right? They paid like everything they owned to just get there, and they had now finally gotten this ship, and they were essentially, I kind of had them going to Kua and some of the smaller planets, and like a few long sections where they just went to Jahrum and the Rimord Reach, to just feel the difference maybe between the political side, that is Coriolis, and then the like free trader side, that is Jahrum, I think. So like I tried to use that just to establish them in that world, and then I piped them into Gasalis as the first like big adventure. They had their own ship with them into that, actually. as well. So all of that, but I just tried to get them to a point where they started to realize they're really, really vulnerable. There is a lot of bad shit going on, and as a consequence of Ghazali, you also get this whole entire political conflict is starting. That it should really be the official start point, I feel, a bit to the Mercy campaign. Like it was meant to be like a single adventure, just a kind of a startup adventure. I deliberately placed things for the Mercy campaign in there, not that they were needed, but that they could be used for GMs that ran that. So the Emerald Disk and the log files and Rama and some of the other characters were like deliberately there so they could be reused later.
Now, Millie, you ran Ghazali for three of us on three of me and a couple of the other patrons.
We did, yeah.
And that did become the prologue for your for your campaign, although not with the same players. How did that work for you?
So I fell in love with Sabitha. I don't know why. That character in Voyage of the Ghazali, I love her. I think she's great. So I decided that Sabitha was Noah's parent. And Sabitha being missing, she owned the ship. She was the original owner of this ship that's going through our campaign. And the first three players worked for Sabitha. Because Sabitha was gone, they couldn't get to the ship. Now Noah's gone. We just need to sort this out. Because if Noah's gone, we've got no access to our ship, no access to our money. Now we're talking to a judge. That kind of stuff. And that was the downward spiral into them being involved. And I was just delighted with myself a couple of weeks ago because I've managed to shoehorn Sabitha into Mercy 2. And I'm like, yes, she's back. But that was so Sabitha in the background somewhere is what's connecting everything, even though our characters have changed. It's Sabitha's ship and that kind of stuff. That's our sort of story through it. But yeah, we started with Ghazali with three different people. And now and again, I'll make references because we decided that the Voyage of the Ghazali, the folks who went on it were reporters for Red Spider. And they were doing they were recording stuff. So now there's these Red Spider reports of things going around. And our players at the start of Mercy, where you have to sort of, it feels very, I always think of it like Dragon Age Inquisition, where you have to pick with, you have to go over to this faction or this faction, this could change your course of your journey through the game sort of thing. And they were picking, and they were all umming and ahhing about it. So we decided that they would just, now Red Spider is technically their patrons, but they're a bit freer to sort of get in as much trouble as they need to, but also they're probably not going to get saved as easily as they might. Gives them, one of my players is making their own courtesan guild, which is interesting given some of the things mentioned in the start of Mercy 3. So Ben's going to have a lot of fun with that, I think. So yeah, they're a little bit sort of wandering around, and we've just, I think compared with a lot of folks, ours is a very light kind of, we get up to silliness, and we're quite daft in respects to a lot of things, but also it's not to say we don't care about it, we're just more, I don't know, I just feel like shenanigans, silliness. We played the children are the future, and the aforementioned courtesan Shanaz is actually from Dabaran. She's a very good storyteller, which fits in with the themes of Dabaran and that kind of stuff. And we were just there was just rip-off merch for her everywhere. And so she's like, I'm going to get my lawyers onto that, which gave us an interesting point. And then afterwards, we want a spa session. So we went off to play Aram's Secret because you start in a spa, and that's kind of the thing. Her lawyers got a load of money from the IP infringement, but now we've just blown it all. We've literally blown it all on Caladrina's expensive spa. So now we're back to square zero. So that, a logical spend and that kind of stuff. So we are a bit daft and having fun, but also there's very much who are these? Why are these people? Oh! Moments as well.
I think it's interesting. My players, when I started out, they also chose kind of explorers / journalists. Actually, they were like really keen on that, and maybe that's because like when you start describing Coriolis as a universe, you start describing it as a very it's full of like old ruins, and there's a lot of mystic threads to kind of untangle. And I think my players like they jumped straight into like, oh, but then we shouldn't just be mercenaries going around shooting stuff. We should explore. Like we should find those mysteries essentially. So they dove into that as well, which kind of showed on Gazalis because they couldn't really fight. So that's why that was someone almost bleeding out on the floor in the first adventure, which we'll get back to the mechanics of play, I guess. But I'll quickly just run through the thoughts of the campaign, maybe in regards to the player's journey. I think, and then you can all kind of comment if there's anything to that. I think the ideas that I had and that we had when we kind of talked this through also together with the Free League, my editor, etc., was that Emissary Lost is it's about like Coriolis is it's the capital city of this universe essentially. It's like everyone goes to Coriolis at some point. You'll see all the factions represented in some way. You'll see all the conflicts, all the hierarchies of culture and society, all the if people want to be mean to someone else, they're gonna be mean to that culture or those people at Coriolis. So it's a good kind of microcosm of what the rest of the universe entails. And we knew that in the first book it would be, I think, disastrous to kind of just throw people out there and go to 20 systems and try to figure everything out, because you wouldn't have the knowledge of the universe yet. So book one is it's pretty railroaded. It's a little bit of an investigation. There is a little red thread there. You get to run around in all the parts of Coriolis, which was deliberate. Like you have to go high up to the top. You get to be in the sprawl of everyone, kind of all the people that don't have the money, etc. And then you go into the slums and like you really dig your way down into the kind of belly of the station. And I think that also, for me, I wanted to do that because I wanted to plant people. I wanted to be have them think of Coriolis as a good friend or the odd uncle or whatever. But there is a relative here that they have a strong relationship to this station. If you put this station in the concept, like in the context of your own campaign, you want people to come back to it. You want people to know people here, go back to that cantina, go back, bribe that official again to get goods through the customs and all of that stuff. And then Kua, because I kind of know I wanted to return to Kua, or I knew that I wanted to do something with the monolith at that point. So I think Kua it's a way for us to take the people from the sprawl and then just put them out into the countryside and have them like see how this kind of social conflict exists in a different environment, where you have plantation owners and people being used by the corporations or by the different factions, to the point where entire like Bay Basin, or however I should pronounce it.
Free Bay Basin.
Yeah, that, I mean, it will essentially it's corrupted, right? That sinkhole is like eating up the village due to, I made the backstory of the Jinn, the deal with the Jinn and all of that stuff. But it's essentially like it's meant to be one of these places you want to like, oh, I want to go back there and explore and dive in caves and find treasure and stuff like that. Oh, but right now we just have to travel through. But you wanted to leave that kind of gem for both the GM, I think, and the players to kind of go through. And then take the players through that journey where they get to actually approach the monolith, which is something that probably has been mentioned, that there is a monolith on Kua, but you want them to stand there and kind of go, oh my God, this is a big thing right there. So there is a storyline around the monolith that you want to kind of establish the players in, I think. So they need a relationship to that as well. And then the introduction of all of the butterfly ships, and you have all of that stuff. But if we look at just those motives that have been planted now, and you go into Mercy 2, the point there, I think, is like, now you have this big relationship. You have the relationship with the emissary that got killed. You have seen the monolith. You understand it. You don't understand what it is, but you understand it to be kind of an ancient artifact of some kind. You have kind of at the beginning of Mercy 2, you wake up, like at the end of the first adventure, you wake up right by the kind of footholds of the monolith, and you actually get to travel up the monolith, and you get to see high society in the monolith. And all of that is deliberate for the spoiler that Matthew mentioned, because you want to be there and you want to see like how the hegemony, exists there, and it's their stronghold. Jonathan?
Leaning heavily into this is a GM only conversation spoilers, I want to ask you a question, because we are talking just GM to GM here, but you're also the writer. So I wanted to ask you something, right? So the monoliths are, and a lot of there's some other tech like artifacts and stuff that in the core rulebook, when they're first mentioned, all this kind of stuff, it's given off as they're from the portal builders
era.
It's from the portal builders. It's not man-made.
Yep.
So the monoliths are supposed to be that, right?
Yep.
It's just that the Santulans, the second horizon, work out how to do stuff with them.
How to control them,
yeah.
Or how to affect them.
How to affect them.
Yeah.
And then also I think is it in Mercy 3? I can't remember where it's specifically said. But also it's mentioned on the Coriolis map. It's one of the bullet points that, there's 36 star systems that each one has 3 bullet points. And one of them is all the way far over in the corner is I think it's Eriku, and there's one called the Web of Izar, and then it's mentioned briefly in it's mentioned briefly in A Song for Jaruma. It's a great big planet encasing black metal
Isornet, that net of Isor.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of given off as this must be portal builder technology, but I think it's later explained somewhere that actually it's a Santulan thing.
It's a Santulan node.
Yeah, that's it.
Exactly. So they use the nodes. They use the nodes in the Portal Wars to have influence, but a lot of their nodes were actually destroyed or shut down. So the Isornet is the last remnant of some kind of connection to the third horizon, which is then accidentally recreated on scene by Jaruma. When she discovers the pattern, she tries to mimic and change the resonance of the planet itself. Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify, like how much sway, like how much was this notes that were in a document from Jan Ringen, how much of this was stuff that you were able to connect together and say, actually, I'm going to make this one line into something more?
Yeah, that's what I did.
Okay.
So a lot of the story is based on all of the little nuggets. Like Coriolis exists on top of a whole bunch of. I think you mentioned before we went live, Jonathan. There's like these small nuggets of like there are some ruins here. There's some There's a lot of like richness in just these small comments, right? But then you want to take some of those. The way I did it was like, instead of inventing new ones, I wanted to take some of these that have already been invented, that possibly players could have been traveling past or have mentioned or whatever. And I wanted them to connect to, like, why are they really there? Oh, well, of course, they're remnants of this entire war that happened before, or these cultures and technologies that existed before. So a lot of this has been kind of brought brought in. The ISORnet wasn't connected to Scene originally. We just knew that the emissaries came from Scene. But I knew that there was a node, that like, there was a hint of possibility of a node in the in the ISORnet, and I wanted Scene to be a node as well. So because that works really well at the Mercy 3 to have a node there.
Yeah.
So like a lot of this is just strung together, and it's just a big puzzle to put, and then some new pieces have been added to that puzzle.
Yeah, I just want to say, from what I have read and in all my planning, also I just wanted to also say, as part of, because we're probably a bit more than halfway through now. Unfortunately,
we've
just kind of like we're in the zone. Maybe we should carry on. I don't know. The players journey. I did actually get to play some of this campaign with some players. The scope of what I wanted to do is a bit grander. I wanted to bring in troop play and even cinematic play from like Alien. And basically, because the Mercy of the Icons campaign it feels so grand, and I don't want it to just be on one group of characters. I feel like it could be much bigger than that. So what I initially pitched to my players, which was a group of 3-4 players originally, and I'm part of I'm sorry, I'm speaking really quickly because I'm excited, but also because I want us to be able to move on. But I want to get this out.
I'll tell you what, Jonathan. Why don't we wait until the part 4, which is precisely about
okay.
scope.
Or we just
no, fair enough. I'll hold on.
Or we reshuffle and we do scope and scale right now, and then we continue.
But we've just changed the title to Culture and Society,
okay,
and we've touched on a vital point. So you were talking about that a big change, and I think now is even within the scope of this program, it's worth saying that Coriolis Station is blown up at the end of book 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And there is very little that the player characters can do about that. I mean, particularly my players felt, they'd only just arrived on Coriolis, and they'd got the judge off the station and were taking her to, something I realized as they were taking her to Dashroom, which is like bloody months away in their ship because their ship's so damn slow. I thought, oh, crikey, they're meant to be down at the monolith blowing up Coriolis, and I'm not going to get them there.
They don't have to be, though.
For not following in with a Children of the Song.
Yeah.
And so they witnessed it from afar, but it blew up. And I remember at the time, a lot of GMs are kind of going, I don't want this in my world. I want my world to be the same world that I bought into at the beginning. Or the other complaint was, oh my God, mass murder. My players are partly responsible for it, for genocide.
Very deliberate from my point. From my side.
Which, yeah, so I'm kind of relishing that, and I like that, and particularly for my players, you side with space Nazis, then you take what the space Nazis get coming to them, in my opinion. But there's a lot of kerfuffle there, a lot of upset. Now, for me, I think this is a great opportunity to sort of rewrite the horizon from new. And you make lots of changes in the beginning of book 3, some of which I'm pleased to say that my campaign foreshadowed. So nothing feels out of place with the changes you've made.
Yeah.
But should we talk a bit about that, about those big changes?
Yeah, I mean, I can very quickly go through. So the thing was, when I got to start writing for Coriolis, I found that it's like there's a lot of factions here. And one of the first things that happened when I started introducing it to my players were like, we can't remember all of these, like who's Cenithian, who is firstborn, who trades with whom, and back and forth. And you kind of go as a GM, well, actually everyone kind of does weird shit with each other. It's an odd smorgasbord of intrigue here. I mean, even the Cenithians, like the main Cenithian factions, are actually fighting each other heavily, both in Mercy 1 and in Mercy 2. Until they realize, like, what if we bury the hatchet and just push everyone else away and just take power? That's the big that's lighting the fuse for the Santulans, who then make sure that the monolith activates and blows everything up. So I think that's that's one of the big things. So what I wanted to do when I kind of got into 3 was like by the end, when we reached 3, I wanted to have fewer factions. That was one of my main goals with the arc, because I wanted also for players who played this arc. So the baseline of this is I want the players to go through another Portal War. And if you look and read the Portal Wars, there's like entire systems gone. Like Otakon is one thing, but actually the Third Horizon is more. Like the 36 systems you see are only the 36 that weren't cut off. There are more systems out there. So I wanted to rewrite the map, and I wanted it to feel like the arc was so big, and that you can't change like you can't stop it. You can only kind of guide it a little bit where you want to go, but you can't stop change. And so factions are gonna hate each other. Factions are gonna get kicked out. They're gonna die out. They're gonna seek allegiances that they may or may not have had before. They're gonna reform. I loved putting the Zenithians in a really bad spot, like taking away their homes literally, with both Coriolis and the Monolith, and take those like powerhouses and then just throwing them out as exiles into the universe. I wanted to do that. Yeah, exactly. But I wanted to do that because like then you start feeling like now they're underdogs in this universe when we step into Mercy 3. So they have been treating the Firstborn like shit. Will the Firstborn now treat them like shit? I wanted to see if we could flip the table on them, or if the players, for example, would act as ambassadors for positive change in helping the Zenithians. So there is a point, for example, in Mercy 3 where they can kind of choose in the end the Great War that happens at the end. They can choose if they want to go in one direction and do one adventure, or if they want to kind of go and help the Zenithians that are getting attacked by the First Horizon. And I wanted there to be like, if you wait with helping the Zenithians, they're gonna be way more decimated, way more like worse off. Or you go there first, but then someone else is gonna suffer. So there is not a good, like there's never a good choice in that choice. But I wanted players to have that in their hand, that choice in their hand.
It's one of the things, factions and everything that's going on within the rule book. So not even necessarily within the Mercy campaign, just like, hey, there are all these factions. The core principle behind the setting of the Zenithians, we're all GMs, we should all know this, but quick recap, right? A long time ago, Earth or Al-Arda sends off a generational colony ship off to a far star, which happens to be Dabaran, and then it takes them, nearly 1,000 years for them to arrive, in which point people have already turned up there because of the discovery of the portals. And so we've got nearly 900 years worth of history and conflict and culture being developed across innumerable star systems. So the Zenithians, they arrive to see that people are already there, and this dream that they were promised is kind of not what they receive. They're not part of the history of the First Horizon, Second Horizon, the Portal Wars, or anything like that. They've got no stock in any of that. And they come to the Third Horizon. They make do. They do what they can. They reinvigorate the Third Horizon, which was in a kind of a dark age. So in a way, like they're kind of good in a progressive way, but also then it turns out, oh, actually they're a bit racist. They're a bit Nazi.
Stinking colonists.
Well, some of them are anyway. Some of them are.
Actually, what I love about all the factions, I mean, you talk about there being too many factions, Richard, but of course, it's almost fractal in that within, if you read the faction descriptions, even within the core rulebook, it'll say, this is what this faction is like. Oh, except for this bit
With these dudes.
of that faction, which is almost exactly the opposite. So even with the space Nazis, the Zenithian hegemony, there are the neo-Zenithians within that who are kind of the good guys, the progressives. And that's not just with those guys, that's the same with everything else. So I can
every faction is listed with like a positive and a negative thing.
Yeah.
Almost. Kind of balancing them out, and it's like you play into that how you want to play into that at your table, and I love that. As we were kind of alluding to, we talked about it before, as we kind of alluded to in this chat here now as well. The book is like it's 400 pages of just rich setting, lore, adventure prompts, things that you could flip open to a page, even in like the rules and the character generation stuff. Like there are bits there and you're like, oh, I could do a thing on that. We could play into that. Like, pardon me. One of the things that I really love, actually, quick thing, right? So we're on the culture and society thing. Very much we're talking human stuff. I've already mentioned the portal builders, but it's very much, they seem to be like, that portal builders. It's how there are portals, how people were able to get to the third horizon before the generation ship. And we're just going to leave it at that. Like there are artifacts that can be found around that we think are portal builders, but some of them, as you have described, Richard, you've written them in to be actually human artifacts from the first or second horizon kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's great. But part of me really wants to know more about the portal builders. And I know that is something that has been given to the game master for game masters to make of them what they will. So in my own campaign, what I want to do, like fundamental statement, the Jinn that are found throughout the horizon are the remnants of the portal builders. For me, that's what they're going to be. So in a kind of a Stargate, the ancients in Stargate, they kind of ascend. They're like, we don't need this mortal coil. We're going to become one with everything. So the portal builders do something like that, but some of them are left behind, some of them are kicked out, whatever it happens to be, right? And they become the Jinn. So they're a good Jinn, they're a bad Jinn, however that plays out. But they are super powerful entities that wander around the horizon, and they interact with humankind, and they're able to be multiple places at once, and however you want to play it. So that's one of the things that I want to do. Now, obviously, Mercy the Icons as a campaign and every other published scenario really doesn't touch a lot on any of that. It is very much still the human-centric conflict, which I still love and appreciate. But part of me really wants to go down that whole alien culture, ancient alien culture stuff, and the magic of the Jinn and science so advanced that it's perceived as magic kind of stuff.
But I think so. An interesting aspect of that is you have the portal builder tech, right? And they've left the horizon with some kind of automated system. So like the monoliths, there is this whole thing where if organic matter goes through portal space, it draws corruption, and eventually, all the systems that are bound by the portals build up corruption. So this was something that the portal builders couldn't fix entirely. Like that's the nature of portals. So therefore, monoliths were placed in deliberate kind of as a center of the web of some of these systems, and every X years they fire off, or at every time the buildup is too high, they fire off, and they essentially eradicate the darkness around them and start from scratch again. So that's essentially like they're the fuse box, I would say, almost in the universe. But then I think you pointed out to something when we were on culture and society. I think that's really interesting and that excites me about Coriolis in general. Then I want GMs to kind of dive even more into is the fact that you have Zenith. It takes 1,000 years for it to reach Dabaran. And during that time, the entire, like, you've gone through people going to the second horizon first, and then they find out that, you know, Santolans are shit. It's a pyramid scheme. We don't want to be part of it. So you first get like some of the first come, you know, leave. You have the Mogul fleet. They leave. Janagir fleet. They're like, fuck you. We're going. We're not coming back. We're going to we're going into exile. And then you have the Order of the Paria, Salos. They're also leaving. They're like, we are prosecuted in our own, like, people are chasing us down. Santolans don't want to have us here. We're leaving and finding our the great planet with the crown of the martyr, and we are settling there. And with all of that going on, you then have the kind of the build-up of the second and third horizon, tech and society, and then the fall during the Portal Wars.
Mm.
And then a ship arrives with 1,000-year-old tech, and it is still literally at the peak of the tech because everything has been blown up and been forgotten, right?
Yeah.
So the richness of the world, I think, comes from imagining what level of technologies did all of these factions have when the third horizon were at its peak, or the second and third horizon were at its peak. And what type of tech does the first horizon have now after 1,000 years of developing their passion for dancing with the darkness? You know, what does that mean for their, I mean, they're literally in Mercy 3 enslaved a monolith. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a huge spoiler, but the end of the book.
But also, I really like, you know, having briefly read ahead, I looked at the overviews. Like there are details of the scenarios that I don't know yet because I'm going to play in some of them with Matthew. But I've got a general overview, and we'll talk about this, I guess, maybe in the scope or the mechanics or something about, you know, GM and player. How do you balance that? But again, big spoiler, Mercy 3, the bit towards the end about how the players, how this whole thing gets wrapped up, how the big thing of the second Portal War, as you just kind of alluding it to, the Horizon War, of the players effectively, either the players do or they send off, and, you know, maybe you can narrate it if you want to. But the idea of effectively going to somewhere in the first horizon and then eliminating that monolith and then, you know, buggering off back home somehow. I can't remember. I didn't read that detail. How did they get home, or did they get stuck there?
There is a note where they could, a friendly GM could possibly let them survive, but I want the first horizon. I would wish for the first horizon to be a one-way trip.
Yeah,
for most GMs, if the players get that far.
I think in the description there, you put down the number of people that are in that one system.
Yep.
And it is enormous.
Yeah.
And you're just like, wow, that's really like, you took what happened at the end of Mercy 2 and the destruction that caused, and then in order to wrap all of this up, like, that number is just phenomenal.
What's the price of freedom? I think it comes down to, and that is probably what they all had to face in the last Portal Wars as well. What is the price of removing the first horizon from the third horizon? And that was probably a pretty staggering number as well. So it's interesting to place the players behind the levers
decision
of that. Yeah, at that point of that decision, because they can make two choices essentially. They can make three choices. They can also be subjugated to a first horizon rule. In theory, there is a little box about that. It just plays more into how the syndicate likes to run things in general. But they can either try. It's a journey at the Horizon Wars. It's a journey taking a ship as far as you can to save as much of the third horizon as possible. Yeah. So you can, if you are not playing well or if you're taking a lot of damage, you might need to end the journey on Cuba and cut off the entire Dabaran trade route essentially. And then you're just sacrificing all of those planets, not sacrificing them as dying, but you're sacrificing them to the first horizon. They're literally going to be eaten up, gobbled up by the first horizon. Or you drive all the way and you get to go through Taiwan, and you get to kind of, jump all the way down to Ainion, which is it's a planet in a system in First Horizon, and you get to take out their monolith, which you've already seen the devastating powers of doing. So it's interesting then to get to do that yourself this time.
Talking of scope and scale now, I think we moving on there now.
Yeah.
I can see the title card's changed.
Yes, yeah, it has. I mean, we are talking about like massive scope and scale, like huge things. And the thing I keep thinking about, right? The thing I keep, we're talking to like people who might not even have started any Coriolis, like, oh great, some really big GM folks who've played it, and all I can think in my head is like, I would be terrified right now of starting this campaign. Yeah. I'm thinking back when I opened up Last Voyage of the Ghazali, and I was like, oh, this is good. Yeah, we like this. I would genuinely be terrified, because we're talking about massive, this war and this, and we need to know all these factions, and the good and the bad, and the mini factions, the fractal factions. I didn't. I started Mercy with just, it's going to be on Coriolis. I'll read the bits about Coriolis. I'll read the book. We'll work it out as we go along. And the beautiful thing about the scope and the scale is because of all the different little factions in there and the weird bits of history, I could, in a session, go, oh yeah, the Order of the Prior, they love spaghetti. It's their favorite dish. And then you can meet an NPC 3 things later who's absolutely like, you've just offended him royally. And you're never sure whether I've got it wrong or somebody's weird. So there is a safety net in there in all this kind of stuff. So we are talking about this massive scale, and we're going to redefine a horizon. And I don't want people to be listening and going like, oh my gosh.
But you do it one goat at a time, right?
Yeah, one goat at a time.
Yeah. So
jump in on this one.
Sorry, go for it. No, go for it.
So, I mean, I totally get you on that 1 million. You're right to a certain degree, depending on how you want to do it. There's a lot of reading up front. There is one way where you could, especially now the 3rd one is out, to have read all the adventures up front, make a whole bunch of notes, and then work out how you're going to drip feed information, which definitely wasn't how I ended up doing it, but I tried as much as I could, with a small amount of it to do a bit of that. But to me, it's more like the other way, which is Coriolis has this beautiful artwork in the books, right? And a lot of role-playing games have had amazing artwork over the time, right? But it does frustrate me when you see this fantastical front cover of a thing, and there's like dragons and like falling moons and it's huge things, and you're thinking, wow. And in it, you're just in a 10-foot by 10-foot room fighting 3 goblins for like 10 years. And you're like, oh man. And that's what I love about like Coriolis, is that like you did get those really epic things. That's one thing my players kept going back to, is like, is it Lubal, the kind of Mercury equivalent? Like those kind of settings, and Xena, and it was just like, wow, I really feel like I'm in this different place. Like it's affecting every action my character does, because I'm worried about like water retention and Lubal, and like whether I'm going to get too hot, or I'm worried about the fact there's acid rain on Gina. So I do think on one side the locations actually felt really fantastical. You felt like you were really at that thing. There was a time when the ship got impounded and they literally free flew with some jets out of Coriolis, out of an emergency hatch to the net to get their ship back. And it really felt like really epic. And again, of course, I used that quote with Richard, in terms of just like disrupting a setting. It's like, you imagine a spell in a very famous role-playing game where it wiped out all dungeons and dragons from that world. That would be quite the spell. And we literally have a Coriolis game that destroys Coriolis. So so to me, I think it was just, that was the big thing that I was really excited about, was the fact you finally got to play this absolutely huge epic, that the scale of it was there, and you really got to take the most out of the campaign setting. And so for me, that was a big exciting point. But yeah, I totally agree with you that it could look a bit daunting from the start. Yeah.
And then there's also like the, as a player kind of thing, like, do I need to know who these are? No, you're an escaped miner from Algol. Why would you know who the Circle of the Seekers were? Don't worry too much about it. Or, would I know that these are, a bad, how would I know what Alchemars is? I've never actually been anywhere other than this canteen. Well, let me tell you about I love the fact that you can buy a raffle ticket to maybe get a seat in Alchemars. Yeah, I'm going to buy a lottery to get a really good meal. And
to get the right to pay for a really good meal.
Yeah.
Meal for free.
Yeah. No, I think an important part here is, or the way I see it at least, is that there's like this is a huge universe to explore, right? But you actually explore it one NPC at a time. So when you meet someone from Sados or from Order Paria, you talk to them, and this person maybe is a trader, so that you get the trader perspective of their culture, right? And then you know a little bit, and this person is very likable, so you kind of, this is nice. And then you go like, what the hell are those doing? They are like terrorists over there. They're doing bad shit. And but then, okay, but maybe you meet them and you get to hear their point of the story, right? So I think as a GM, don't get messed up, like don't get too stuck on the big arcs, because like try to focus on how those big arcs are conveyed through people. So if shit is going on, if like the Zenithians are trying to take over the council, talk to the person on the street about what they think about that. That's the way better approach than trying to get them into the room, where where all the intrigue is going on, I think. So I would just approach it one NPC at a time.
That's really helpful, especially when I find myself basically, going through a document where I've listed out all of the scenarios, the order in which I would like to play them, the dates in which they land within the five cycles that the Mercy of the Icon campaign kind of takes place. So I'm there like, cool, I'll pop this here, pop this here, pop this here, play this out. Like, and then part of me is also like, I only need to read about this at this point. I only need to read about this at this point. Like almost like I only need to read about the next bit after having kind of sketched out where everything's going to be. So,
sorry, Jonathan. Sorry.
No, that's all right.
I
should also add. I did start to play this with some of my players. I think I was starting to talk about this before we moved on to culture and society. I've done Last Voyage of the Ghazali, much like Millie ended up doing. So I had this, although I had the same players. The same players had I did troop play. So the same players had multiple characters. For the one scenario, Last Voyage of the Ghazali, they played individuals who had no connection with each other, but were forced together to get off the Ghazali. And then things play out for them. Those characters have some information. They have that lived experience of what happened on the Ghazali, right? The same players then pick up new characters for Wake of the Martyr. So we then went, okay, right, so we're going to switch over. We've got a new storyline going here. Who are they going to be? These guys made effectively academics. These are all characters that worked in some way or another for the Free League College on Coriolis, because Nor is a student. And so we had that connection of, okay, so one of the characters is actually the tutor of Nor. So there's a personal connection, office hours kind of thing. Oh, they haven't shown up. I'm going to go to their student accommodation. And that's how we let it in. So we had a lecturer who was a mystic fugitive, effectively, but also, being a lecturer. We had a scientist who was basically a lab tech at the college, and then we had someone who was effectively an operative. That the whole idea was they were the person that the college would send out. Hey, we need this. Can you acquire some? We don't tell us how. We just need these. Can you acquire them? And so we had this. And so they weren't particularly combat heavy. So when it came to exploring the cellar, what I did was we then kind of swapped out again, and we just brought in some NPCs. And so we bulked them up. And so it's just the players were remaining the same, but the player characters that they took on, which kind of leads into the scope and scale of what I was saying initially, was the Mercy of the Icons is huge. It is horizon spanning, I personally, I feel like it cheapens it a little bit to just have the story be about one group of players that just happen to be everywhere, or people think. I know, Rickard, you put in a little bit about how the players end up being the chosen ones, as it were, and that's all well and good. But I don't want to do that. I want to have either the same small group of players. So I might, when I find some time, I want to bring those guys back, but I also want to open it up to other players as well, part of the London RPG community, who I still I interact with quite a bit, even though I no longer live in London. Opening it up to be a campaign where people can jump in for a scenario, playing a character that makes sense to be there. And then they might, okay, I'm not going to be in the next scenario. We're going to have these characters.
Almost making it like a West Marches style kind of thing.
Yeah, a little bit like a West Marches
we
style.
need to do an infiltration mission. Let's go and find 3 people who have got infiltration characters who might be useful and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's interesting because the thing I was listening to or thinking about in the end of Mercy 3, you have the Portal War, the Horizon War kind of thing.
Yeah.
And one of the things, because I used to run a lot of 5e Adventure League. If you're not familiar with Adventure League, it's a weekly session where you could have 6 random people at your table and you're all going to go through a mission together. And they do at big conventions. Folks who know me know I love my UK Games Expo. And at the UK Games Expo, I've taken part in Dungeons and Dragons Epics. And what an epic is, it's a huge multi-table event where what you do during this 4 hours, your party will feed successes or failures to a grander goal. And when I was reading the bit in Mercy 3 about the Paris, and I was looking at it, and in my head is like, this is a huge epic event just here on the table. You could have, this table are going over to help these people, these tables are going over to help these people. Do you all play as ship captains? And at some point you have a captain summit where they all go together and decide what they're going to do to save the horizon, that kind of stuff, which sort of leads into Jonathan's kind of troop play kind of thing. And this is, the big grand things, and I loved it. But where you're talking about like different characters changing, one of the things I know my folks love is starting a book with a new character, like this blank set of numbers. You talk about my husband's character Silsila at the start of this book, and we don't really know much about him, and us as people, play as humans, don't really know much about our character. But by the end of the book, we will know what sort of man Silsila Zamil is, and we'll have got to some of his dirty secrets or his, truths, and we will have explored about how and why he now does X, Y, and Z. And I think to a level, you only experiencing it through one set of eyes might cheapen the grander Horizon story. But what we do as RPG players, we love this development and growth.
Yeah.
And we want to see this story through these 6, 8, 12 eyes. So, it's...
I mean, I think that's interesting from a, like, this Fireside chat came to be because I listened to Matthew and Dave. And Dave was ranting about, he wants just to be like on this epic journey, and he wants to be able to affect things and a little bit of that. And I think it comes down to like the core of why you're playing. So I think for me personally, Mutant Year Zero unlocked something for me because I felt it's interesting when something is about the place, and you're actually maybe rolling up 3 characters each, right? And they're dying like flies all over, but the arc remains. And it's interesting to say, like, when you're gone through on a campaign, the original characters don't really exist anymore, but they exist in the memory of the last characters that you play that finished the campaign. So there is something interesting with having characters taken out and new players kind of introduced, or new characters, I would say, taken in, and knowing about the deeds of the other ones, right? So you can literally kill your players in Mercy 2 if you want to, and then you have people...
Characters.
Yeah, yes, you can you can kill the characters. Please refrain from killing players. But yeah, you kill the characters, and then you, like, when you go into Mercy 3 or like the build up for Mercy 3, you work with someone who almost saw those as martyrs, or you have a different story, but they have seen the outside perspective, and you can bring them into the war. Because in the end, it's just the span of the war that you wanna get to in the end. But
yeah, and I do struggle a little bit with two down at heel detectives saving the world, or saving the entire universe at the end of book 3. I don't know whether they will. I mean, by default, actually, we kind of did a little bit troopy, a little bit West Marches, because having run the very, very noirish first section of the first book with just the 2 characters, we invited then loads of people. I mean, particularly for the trip down into the real sanatorium, we knew that we needed some heavy hitters for that one. So that was the first time we said, come and join us, but you got to play somebody who's good with weapons, good at fighting. And then we had you, Havima, Jonathan, joined us when we needed to do some socializing on the surface of the planet. Millie, you joined us when we needed to do some jungle wandering on the surface of the planet. And so it's been really useful to bring guest characters in. I've even had a couple of characters just do an adventure when Dave and Tony were away doing something else. And so I think that it really does lend itself as a campaign to getting different player characters, if not different players, involved in different aspects of it.
And credit where credit's due, Matthew, when you opened up your actual play and said, hey, do you guys want to come in and guest? Like, that is what triggered it for me, because I wanted, because initially I was thinking, okay, we'll just have, one group, small players, will do troop play. Like that kind of makes sense. But then as you did that, and the nature of London role-playing community, which I'm part of, I'll put a link in the chat. I won't. Maybe Millie can. It doesn't matter. You can look them up. We mostly play online now anyway, so there's some in person, but it's not a lot. I don't think I'm selling them right now, so don't worry about it. They have a big Dungeons & Dragons 5e West Marches like campaign called Cantus. And the whole thing was 4 years ago. It started 4 years ago, I think, thereabouts. They've done more than 1,000 sessions now, 11 seasons, where it's all been made up. A group of dungeon masters got together. They kind of come up with an overarching plot, but every session is a once-off. You leave the town, you go do adventure, you return home. And they've been doing that. They've been building the world for 4+ years now, over 11 seasons. There have been 11 season finales, big things, multi-table events. And so I come from that background where I'm like, cool, I want to involve as many people as I can in this game. Coriolis is wonderful. I want so many people to touch this, to be a part of this, to experience this. I want people that only know Dungeons and Dragons to experience something else. And I want them to experience Coriolis because it's different. It's really good. I enjoy that it's human-centric. I enjoy that it's also very, like, it's grey, like there's good and bad. There's no like, oh, the lawful evil lich is out to kill all the cuddly owlbears in the nearby forest, so you need to do something about it. Like that, it's not like that at all. So that's one of the things. So I want as many people from, specifically in my instance, from LRC to be impacted by this game. If anyone from there is listening to this, because I did advertise it, I said, hey, campaign spoilers, but come and watch.
Join us, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's part of my driving thing behind doing troop play, cinematic, multiplayer, multi-character setup of going. There's 20 to 30 scenarios that can be played out. in a particular order. They don't all have to have the same characters, but the players all reporting, they all write up and they say, oh, this is what's happened and stuff like that. So you get a little bit of a forum going, people writing it up. So the players get the whole story. It's like they're all watching, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They're all watching The Expanse as it plays out, even though all the different characters are experiencing only little bits of it here and there. The Game of Thrones kind of thing, and then they're able to enjoy it. That's where I'm coming from. That's what I want to achieve. Anyway,
I think that's a great.
So we're
great
running
idea.
out of time now, and I just want to give the last word to James. We've
Last
got
word.
there's a lot we haven't covered. Ricard, I'm going to invite you on the podcast. We'll talk about rules and stuff.
Let's talk about rules on your podcast.
On the podcast in a couple of weeks' time or something like that. James, though, we've had a load of questions that have been coming up on Twitch, which are all kind of, but how do I run this? So, James, I think you've got some useful hints that maybe aren't as ambitious as the different ways that Millie and Jonathan and I have been running it. How does a GM run this campaign?
Yeah, and look, it's inspiring to hear. It must be a huge for the guys who created Coriolis, for Ricard who's created this campaign, just to see how much you've inspired everyone to do these incredibly ambitious things. It makes more people want to do these. I think that's a great sign. But for me, yeah, it's generally I've got the same old role playing gang every Friday kind of thing, and it's I'm just running this as a regular game. So. Look, the first one, I'm going to give the absolute cheapest advice ever, but look, thankfully, we have tons and tons of artwork in the books, right? And that's the first step, I think, is that it's incredibly evocative artwork. Just simple things like you're in a spaceport or you're in the kind of docks in Coriolis and a ship comes in and there's Arabic writing on the side of the ship and the shapes of the ship follow certain kind of architectural designs. Things like that immediately sort of make people go, oh yeah, maybe I was imagining it wrong, or I was imagining something more generic. So pulling people in with the phenomenal artwork and the character drawings as well, like, oh, this person is a judge and this is how they look. Maybe they don't imagine previously, before seeing the photograph, they might not imagine face paint, they might not imagine shawls. So I love the fact that the book does make a real effort to draw out as much of this as possible. So I think it's that really, really helps in setting that tone. And then there's just constant reminders to it, whether it's like certain events at times of day in Coriolis, or it's the fact that people have sugar globes everywhere, or people are smoking hashish or similar kinds of things at the table.
And you want to plant as many of those small things as possible, especially the sugar globes. Plant them well, I would say. No, but one thing I actually recommend. So while writing this, I've made sure to research all the factions, where they come from, what their history is, because in the beginning the imagery is actually a little bland. It's like it is, Arabic setting in space, and then there is not that much more thought put into it. But if you look at it, there's like first, second, third horizon, different factions, different social structures, etc. So I try to actually put all of that into, there is an appendix to the third book. It's about ships, because it's a war with ships. But all of those go through, like, why is the expression of the nomad swarms like this? And why is the Janhagir fleet different from the regular nomad swarms? And what is special with the consortium ships? And why do the Foundation look different, etc.? And I try to blend aesthetics there together with some background knowledge of each of the factions and where they all come from. And I think maybe now, if there is a GM out there that's listening to this and you haven't played the campaign yet, or you are just about to start, I would actually recommend go there, look at that, and actually bring that into your descriptions of the world, because that wasn't really created in the beginning, but I wanted to have that created for during the campaign.
This is a call out to John Salquist to get to and start making.
Yeah, start making ships. Damn it!
those ships, the illustrations that he's got for the ships that he's made, it's just it's perfect.
Yeah. We made sure to work with Gustav both in the second and third book to make sure that some of these, because I wrote down all of these things years ago. So I made sure that when he did illustrations for the second book and the third book, he had those prompts for the ships that he made, which is why the ship in Song for Jaroma looks the way it does, etc.
How long have you been working on this?
Yeah, a long time. Since Tales from the Loop came out, I think I've been essentially right before Tales of the Loop beta. I don't remember when that was.
That's fantastic.
That's when I got brought into Coriolis. Yeah.
Ricard, if I have a quick request, sorry, I was just going to say, I would love to see, like, maybe it's not that exciting, but I'd love to see just a piece of artwork of the net. Like, it's one of the weird omissions that, like, no one seems to have, like, put in.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe we should poke Free League about that. I actually, there is one image, I think, of the net, which is this weird hull-shaped thing at one point in one of the old books or something. Might only be in Swedish, but I think there is like some structure of these beams, etc., existing somewhere.
I think I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, it's not great though. I mean, it would be good. That's why I destroy it all anyway. So it's like,
if you can't draw it, destroy it.
Exactly.
There is one illustration. I think there's one in book 2 where things go up, where the net is also exploding. So you see lots of dots around. They're all being exploded as well. So you kind of see this whole thing, because it's far out from Coriolis, so it's got to be very small, because obviously it's not shown in these illustrations. So I imagine that the net is actually it's a bunch of nodes. Yes, there's things connecting it to make it an actual net, but it's a bunch of nodes that people dock to, and then they get shuttles in, kind of thing. So
we have broken into the space bus to get out there. We've broken into that to get to our ship before.
Yeah. I tried to describe it when in the second book, when you escape.
Just before you destroy it, yeah.
When it's impounded, when your ship could potentially be impounded if you have the wrong benefactor, I guess.
Can I just quickly say, before we move on, or whatever, Richard, thank you for your work on this campaign. Particularly, like, having what you've just explained about how book 1 was written. It's very railroady, but it does take you through a very introductory, hey, this is it. Like, you get to see all the levels of Coriolis. You get to see some of Kua, the monolith, the conglomerate, that kind of stuff. I get that. I appreciate that. But also in books 2 and 3, you just open it up and there's a bunch of tables. You've got mini scenarios and, like, here's this location. Here are these people. That I love. Like, GMs that are watching this that are iffy on Mercy of the Icons, do you want to play it or not? Get the books anyway, because they are full of NPCs, mini scenarios, adventure prompts, things that you can use to, scrap it, rewrite it, make it your own.
Yeah,
so that is a just putting that out there now. If you don't have these books, you play Coriolis, get these books. Even if you don't play the campaign as partially written, make it your own.
I would also encourage people. There is the Free League workshop where you can put your scenarios that you write, etc. I think if anyone wants to write some scenarios that actually kind of merge into the campaign, take my snippets, because as Jonathan mentioned, I've tried to put embryos of missions in there for people who want to span the time between the main missions, and also explore some of the threads that are maybe just kind of cautiously, like, that you jump into inside of a mission, but that you're running past because the mission is taking you elsewhere. So if anyone feels like inclined to write any of those, like, write those out and put on the great interwebs for other people to enjoy, please do. I encourage it.
Yeah,
I have a similar request, Ricard. Actually, I think this campaign, now it's like fully realized, is crying out for a kind of companion similar to stuff that a lot of Cthulhu. They did, like, Masks of Nyarlathotep. Like, one thing that I think, if I were to run this again, I would definitely have small cards for each of, for instance, just the ambassadors and stuff like that. So just people would be like, oh, that's who that guy is, that's who that guy is, and they're attached to those factions, and this is what the council looks like right now in Coriolis. And as people start to go, or as you meet them, people can connect to them a lot better, because there are a lot of people in that, and I think it's very difficult for players if you just meet together once a week and you're like, oh yeah, right, hang on a second, here's like 40
Who was that person? What did they do? Da, 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 da. Yeah.
Single Room are really good for that. GM resources that they release with the Throne of Thorns campaigns. Just throwing that out there. Free League have some experience.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's the same company, right? So that's good.
So Millie, your hostess.
Oh, I'm
Have
hostess?
you got any final words or requests?
Final words or requests? I don't know. I always think of playing Mercy the Icons like this is my game. Like, I know I've got players who are playing the game, but I am having as much fun exploring the horizon, putting these folks in doing that kind of stuff as if I was and I know we've talked about like troop play and bigger play and changing characters dying. It's like, I don't mind if 6 other people come next week and that kind of stuff. I wanna carry on. I will, if for whatever reason it turns out like the folks I'm playing with, if Pete and Ben and Graham for some reason decide they don't want to play book 3, I will find at least 3 players and we'll just play it, and they can be that kind of stuff. I just love the setting and the world. It gives me like, I want to go over there. I want to find out what the Circle of the Seekers are doing. I want to go over there and see what they're up to. And I want to go over there and I want to see what that kind of stuff. And I just love it. And that's like, it's one of the few times where it doesn't feel like being a GM is a job. I genuinely feel like this game captures like it is. We're all players. I just know the spoilers. Yeah, that
you get
sort
to
of
do
stuff.
the big reveals.
Yeah, I know the spoilers, and getting like I think I was joking on like Facebook and stuff. Like, as soon as book 3 pre-order went out, I was bought it. I'm reading it now. I'm reading it. I need to know. And then that's like, I don't get that excited about when the next 5e book comes out or the next whatever book, but no, I need to know, because it is, for me, I'm as much of a player in this game as the folks who have created their own individual characters, and I love it. Good job, everyone.
Thank you all.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody. So thanks on behalf of the podcast. I'll just say thank you before we start recording, and we will invite you back, Ricard, to ask you about the mysterious missing third section of this long discussion.
Exactly.
But thanks as well, Millie, for hosting us on Garblag Games. We'll put links to that in the show notes on our thing. I don't know how it all works on Twitch. You'll explain at some point.
I'll drop over to the Effekt Discord. We'll have a chat. It'd be great.
That you have to be a patron to do that, though.
Yeah, exactly. Of course.
And which is great.
So patronize the Effekt podcast and Garblag Games.
Yes,
boom, there you go.
All of it, all of the above, if you can, or don't if you can't. Just join in.
Buy Mercy of the Icons and Coriolis.
Do.
Thank you guys for letting me kind of like spew my thoughts on this that I've been, sat with working on my own, and being able to share with someone's been really helpful and encouraging, and listening to you guys as well and taking some of that stuff on board. When I do eventually start playing this through my Mercy of the Icons,
continue.
I will let you all know. I will shout it from the rooftops. I will post about it. I probably won't tweet about it, but by the time I do it, Twitter might be dead and gone. It'll be new Twitter that will take a few years to be built from the ruins of old Twitter. But thank you. I feel like I talked very quickly and I kind of took over a little bit, so I apologize, but thank you.
I think my parting word is writing this wouldn't have been nearly as exciting as it has been, because I've actually been able to follow Millie, James, and Matthew's journeys into this campaign and in this game, and a few other GMs out there as well. I think it is the community that gives it life, to be honest, and it's also the reactions of the community that that inspire. So even when people were hating a little bit at the end of book 2, I also laughed inside and felt they haven't seen nothing yet. So there is this feeling of like, yes, people are on this journey, and it's very exciting for me to have had the privilege, I would say, to allow these journeys to unfold. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're going to turn us off, Millie?
I will, yeah. Quickly, before I switch everything off, because where can folks who have joined Garblag to watch this and now want to hear like more of the things, tune in, where do they go to find the Effekt podcast? What do we do?
They go to www.effektpodcast.org to start their journey, but we're also on YouTube. And you can also check us out on www.effektap.org.
With a K, remember.
Oh, yeah, and it's with a K.
It's a fancy way
because
of
we're
spelling
Swedish.
it.
We're not Swedish, but it's a Swedish Effekt.
But yeah, I'll post some links in the Garblag Games Discord as well. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been awesome. I'm very excited. I'm going to play on Tuesday night, and hopefully, I don't know. We're trying to find out what's going on Aram's Ravine. We're not going to find it out. We're just going to get drunk and play cards. That's what we're going to do.
Sounds good.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you very much, folks. I'm going to press some buttons. We're going to disappear, and we'll see you all later.